listening to the Cricket Podcast.
I think it was a disgraceful performance, and I think it should never be permitted to happen again.
That is very good.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where today we will be previewing the first tests of the English summer as England take on New Zealand. I think we've also got a little bit of county championship, we've got a little bit of IPL chat, and we should have 10 or 15 minutes right at the end of the show for whatever questions people want to ask us. I'm Jack Hope. I'm joined today by Max Rowe Brown. How are you doing, Max Rowe Brown? Are you excited about the return of cricket?
Hello, Jack. Yes, I'm very well, and yeah, as you say, very excited about cricket being international cricket being back and TV cricket being back, which is great. Also still riding high on the waves of the weekend and some excellent sporting action there. And we've got the Euros coming up as well, so it's we've got a festival of sport coming up over the next month or so, and that makes me very happy.
It is interesting that Ross has declined to join us for the podcast immediately following Chelsea's Champions League victory. How much do you think we can read into that his disappearance?
I assume that accounts for 100% of the reason. He obviously is devastated and cannot accept that Tottenham are, as have been pointed out to him by many of our listeners, absolutely terrible.
Max, before we get into the cricket, have you got any messages for our listeners?
Yes, so you should like and subscribe to this video and this channel, and follow us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter and Instagram. Get in touch with us by email if you like, the cricketpod@gmail.com, or head over to Patreon and support us there if you are feeling so inclined.
Yep, www.patreon.com/the cricket pod. What are we working towards, Max? What's our landmark that we're trying to achieve?
We're looking for a mammoth double figures.
Yeah,
I think we're nearly there, aren't we?
We're on 9.
We're on 9. That's as close as you can get.
Anyway, we will stop talking about that now, because if we carry on talking about it, I'm sure people will get too excited and they'll start going to Patreon instead of watching the live stream or listening to the podcast, which is what we really want you to do. So let's get into the cricket. Max, normally you provide the summary, as it were, of the cricketing action we have watched. Today, your task is slightly different. You're going to be summarising the cricket that we will be watching. Are you going to take it away? Are you ready? England v New Zealand. Talk to me.
Yeah, let's see if I can translate the skills to a different a different approach. England and New Zealand, yes, they are about to face off in a 2-match test series in what many commentators have described as occurring this month. You would be forgiven for describing it as a sort of an outcast of a series, I guess. The kind of the runt of the litter. It's taking place outside both the World Test Championship rotation and the Futures Tour programme. But that would, you shouldn't belittle its importance for both teams just because of that, because for very different reasons. And aside from the fact that we have actually got some international cricket back on our screens, which is very exciting. For England, we've got the chance to see some fresh new faces, somewhat enforced by injury. We are guaranteed to see one debutant with the gloves, and we might even see 2. Could you imagine that? 2 new players for England.
Yeah. It was
something else.
A feast of debutants.
Yeah. And for New Zealand, they've got the chance to acclimatise to England and the Duke's ball, build up some form and confidence ahead of the showpiece World Test Championship final in Southampton. So it might not be the most important Test series of the year, but that does not make it any less intriguing, and I think really exciting as well, because we've got two very good teams. A lot of unknowns as well. So I think we could yet learn quite a lot from these two games.
I have to say, my initial thoughts on this, it is a little bit of a coup for New Zealand, isn't it? To get two matches against England in England
with the Duke's ball
in the 3 weeks before they have to play India in the final. You quite literally could not prepare for that final any better than this. We did get asked one interesting question from Twitter. Rowan asked, what's the rationale behind holding the series now? Although I'm not complaining as I get to see some international test cricket in this cracking weather. That's Rowan, who's not my brother. My brother's name's Rowan, but it's not that Rowan. It's a different Rowan. Max, what is the rationale? Because it's a little bit of a weird one, isn't it? It wasn't on the Future Tours programme. It wasn't on the World Test Championship schedule. The points don't matter. It's why are we bothering? Why is this cricket on?
Yeah, it's a bit of a misfit, isn't it? But well, I guess it's because there was a gap in the calendar. We've been trying to squeeze in a lot of cricket. We've got the England-India series, which was delayed, and we've got that taking up a lot of the summer. You've got the 100, which is the very important for the ECB to get right and have everyone available for in so much as they can. So and then you've got the limited over stuff at the end of the year with the World Cup and some ODI series. So it's kind of the only slot there was to fit something in, and I guess they just had a chat with New Zealand. We're like, let's play some cricket. Maybe New Zealand, we're very, very, very kind and very persuasive in suggesting that it would be a perfect opportunity to get some cricket in. But I think at the end of the day, it's trying to get as much cricket in as possible, isn't it? After we lost so much last year.
Yeah, and there is going to be loads of cricket. So they've managed to fit these matches in, from an England point of view, into a schedule that includes white ball series against Sri Lanka and Pakistan coming up pretty shortly afterwards. The India series, obviously, which is not necessarily what we're all looking forward to, but the main event of the summer as far as I'm concerned. Because of that, England have kind of rested, half of their team, a third of the team, after they came back from the IPL and the quarantine. I have heard that part of the reason that the series is being held is to say thank you to Sky for not kicking off too much about the 100 not taking place last year and obviously the subsequent loss of broadcasting revenue. So it's like, we can fit some games in, and you probably, we avoided quite a costly legal case probably by not kicking off last year. And also it's something, do you remember a couple of years ago England went to New Zealand for not World Test Championship points as well? It's got something to do with paying back New Zealand for doing a favour. Yeah, a
lot of the organisation of cricket these days seems to be a quid pro quo, doesn't it? Yeah, that seems to be pretty much the nature of it. So, but yeah, no, it's fine. I've got no complaints. It's the more the better for me.
Anyway, I think this is sort of a long way of saying that there are some pretty strong pre-season friendly vibes to this series. Should we talk about England, or do you want to talk about New Zealand first?
Let's kick off with England.
Well, they, I think, are going to be using this series to blood, as they say, some new players, and to bringing back maybe some fringe players, and maybe to give some of the guys that are a little bit inexperienced some more experience. I think I would expect, and maybe you've got different opinions here, Max, but I think we'll see Ollie Robinson play both tests. I think we'll see James Bracey play both tests. And I think there's a good chance we shall see Craig Overton come in as well at some point. And then on top of that, obviously, we've got Dan Lawrence, Ollie Pope, Sibley, Burns, etc., filling out the rest of the batting order. Besides Root, and I think this is where England, there are really a lot of questions. I mean, I'm excited to see Ollie Robinson, and we'll get onto him in a moment. But I think that the big questions for England, and Max, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this, are on the batting side, where the second most experienced batter in the team is Rory Burns, who's played 23 tests. they'll be licking their lips, won't they? Bolt and Southey.
Well, Bolt won't be because he's
of course, no. Well, he might be
not getting to
test,
the UK until Friday, but prospect of getting at some of these players. But actually, when you think about it, I don't think it's not bad. It's not a bad batting lineup. What we're looking at, there's not a lot of Test experience in there, but there is plenty of Red Bull experience, and some of those new players who've come in, either we know are supremely talented, or in the few games they played in some really tough conditions as well in India and in that series, have looked like they may well be good enough to hold down a slot. In the past you've seen people come in and sort of after 5 games you wonder whether their time is already up. But I think with some of the players that have come in recently, there's a sense that they could well do the job, and they're pretty gritty. And we've also got this an interesting situation with this England squad, which is very different to what we've seen over the last year or so, in that we've gone from trying desperately to find someone who will put themselves at number 3 so that Joe Root doesn't have to do it, and then and seeing what we've got further down the order is actually we've now got 5 people vying who would normally bat 3 and 4 in the squad. So you've got basically top order batsmen down to number 7, even if they're not that experienced. So from that point of view, it's
8 and 9 can't bat.
Yeah, I'll say from that point of view, that's right. The problem comes after that, of whether you've got the longest tail in the history of international cricket. That's where I'd be licking my lips. I'd be thinking I'm padding my stats.
Yeah, I suppose that's one way of looking at it. I think, in a sense, one of the big stories from this is the players who aren't playing. So, if you've not been following along, or you just want to hear us talk about it, nobody from the IPL, not named Sam Billings, will be in the England squad for either of these 2 tests v New Zealand. What does that mean? That means no Butler, no Stokes, no Chris Wokes,
Curran, Ali.
No Curran, no Ali.
Bairstow.
Well, I mean, Bairstow, obviously, after his roaring success in India, he'd be the first name on the team sheet, you would think. and then obviously no Jofra Archer as well. Jofra Archer is almost a separate discussion to the rest of them. But Max, broadly speaking, are you happy with this rotation, or do you think that, given the IPL ended, a month ago now, surely they've seen their family? Like, how much time do you want to spend with your kids?
Well, I think the thing is, if you give one person some, respite from the bubble, then you kind of have to do the whole lot, don't you? And it's there's complications around the travel and that kind of thing. I don't have an issue with them being given a break, given what's about to come up this summer. Like, all these guys are going to be involved in a lot of cricket. And it's going to be the kind of cricket where we want our best team out. We had the rotation policy in India over the winter, but we're looking at building a team for the Ashes and a team for the 2020 World Cup, and it's getting into the big boy cricket now. So if you give them the pre-season friendly series off, I don't think it's too much of a big deal. I think the issue we've got is obviously we touched on it. It's the balance, isn't it? No Ben Stokes, no Sam Curran, no Chris Wokes, leaves you slightly struggling for a bit of all-rounder space.
Oh, big time. I think that is the issue. It's and then I think beyond that, the batters that we have got available, and you spoke about this quite well, they're all top order batters. Like, ideally, you'd want one of them to be comfortable batting 6 or 7, maybe scoring a strike rate of 60 or 70. Nothing outrageous, but prepared to push on. I'm not really convinced that any of this England batting lineup have that in their locker. So I think they will need to score runs at the top of the order. If they're going to be successful against New Zealand and quite possibly against India as well. Although you would probably think that Curran or Wokes would play against India, and you would think that unless there's a complication with Stokes' hand, he'll be immediately back in as soon as they can. as soon as they can play him. We should probably talk about Jofra Archer as well briefly before we talk about the new guys. He has had an operation on his elbow, and the rumours are, and I think the rumours were started by him in a Daily Mail column, that he will not play until possibly the Ashes, possibly the World T20. That means he will not be playing against New Zealand next week or tomorrow. But it also means he will, or is very unlikely to feature against India this summer. Do you think that's a pretty big blow, Max, or do you think at home maybe England will be all right rolling with that one?
Well, we certainly got a better chance of rolling with it at home. That's for sure. It's a massive blow, isn't it? Because he lights things up in. It's basically he'll turn games around, won't he? If it's getting a bit stale, you can bring Jofra Archer on and hope that he'll do something. But that said, we do have other players who can come in and do it. Mark Wood's pretty quick. Ollie Stone is also very quick if he can keep himself fit. So I think there's also experience there as well. Mark Wood's a hugely experienced player. So the bowling is where England can be fairly confident, and I think not having Jofra Archer for that home series it's a real shame in terms of getting more experience for the Test team and preparing for the Ashes. But in terms of that series in itself against India, I think it'll have an effect, but it won't be. It's not going to be the deciding factor. Yeah.
Cool. Looking forward to tomorrow then, Max. Which of the newer England players are you most excited about seeing?
Well, for me, it's got to be Ollie Robinson, just because he's been so often talked about getting into the team, and he's been around the fringes and not made it in, and it's obviously hard to break into that bowling unit with the experienced duo that we have there. I just hope that he gets to play. Well, he really, they've spoken in the lead up to this about it being an opportunity to show some new faces, new fresh blood, that sort of thing, and I really hope they put their money where their mouth is on that, because there is a massive, you can just see England reverting to type and go, oh, actually, maybe we should pick Craig Overton, because the batting is a bit light down the bottom and he offers a bit more of a another guest there on your screen. So yeah, I really want to see Ollie Robinson play. I hope he does.
Yeah, I'm most excited about him as well. If you don't know who he is, he's a guy who's really tall and has averaged below 20 for the last 4 years in first-class cricket. That's not a cumulative average. Every year his average has been below 20. And if you play first-class cricket in England, you play quite a lot of games, so it's a reasonable sample size. Basically, he is... People describe him a little bit like Glenn McGrath, which is probably slightly flattering, to be honest, because...
That would be flattering for anyone.
Yeah, exactly. But he has a lot of that vibe about him. He's tall, he bowls slightly back of a length, he gets a little bit more bounce than people think. That means that batters play a lot of false shots to him. The ball isn't where they expect it to be. And that, if you ever tried batting, is a problem.
That's what got me out of the weekend.
Yeah, in terms of his prospects against New Zealand, he's slightly better against right-handers, which I think will help him against that New Zealand side. And if you are an England fan, I think one of the reasons you should be particularly excited about him coming into the team is that he looks like the kind of bowler who has an extra dimension. In Test cricket, quite often bowling lineups, they're basically 3 opening bowlers and a spinner, and then like an all-rounder. And that means that one of the opening bowlers is bowling with an older ball in a role that they don't really perform very often and they maybe don't really understand. And I think actually, if you're going to be critical of England over the last couple of years, that's sort of what they've done with Jofra Archer a little bit. Like, they make him bowl first change and a line and a length certainly, that isn't necessarily natural to him in red ball cricket, and it makes him a little bit ineffective sometimes. He also has to bowl like long spells. I just don't think they've managed him particularly well. Robinson, though, if you look at his bowling average across the last 4 years, it actually improves as the ball gets older. So it goes from 17.87 with the new ball to 15.2 with a ball older than 60, and then 16 and 15 and a half in between. So it's he's certainly doing something, or able to get something out of pitches and out of that older ball that is a little bit uncommon. If people think, or the stereotype when people talk about New England bowlers coming into the first team is if they're not express pace, they think they're going to be some dibbly dobbler. And that often, to be fair, is the case. Think, Sam Curran, or think even Chris Wokes. That's sort of what Wokes does, isn't it? It's put it up there, hopes it swings around a little bit. But I think Robinson maybe has something else to his game. And, hopefully he gets off to a good start, because I think he could be a real asset against India later in the year, providing England with an option that might, generate some extra bounce. A prospective England team, Max, and call me out if you think any of these are wrong: Burns, Sibley, Zach Crawley, Joe Root, Ollie Pope, Dan Lawrence, James Bracey, Ollie Robinson, Jack Leach, Stuart Broad, James Anderson.
Yeah, so that seems the most likely. My only query or thought is whether they eschew the spin of Jack Leach and go with some pace, extra pace in Mark Wood. I don't know whether they would do that, but it is an option. We're playing we're playing at the start of the summer. It's not necessarily the best time of the year for spin in this country. I think spin averages 41 in tests in June and 40 in tests in May, compared to pace averages of 32 and 30. So obviously pace is always better than spin in this country, but the difference is the biggest in May and June. So that there's an opportunity maybe to go with the 4-man pace attack and leave the spin overs up to Root and Lawrence. It's an option that they could go for. I don't think they will, but I wouldn't mind seeing it. It would be very harsh on Jack Leach, but
I wouldn't hate it either. I agree. If they wanted to play Wood or Stone, fine, do it. Not bothered. Aditya in the chat, and he's asking, are we excited about Zach Crawley, or where is Zach Crawley's career right now? I think he actually probably is, of the Lawrence, Pope, Crawley trio, the one.
He's the first name on the team sheet out of them.
Oh, do you think that? I think I think he might be the opposite way round.
Really?
Yeah, I think he's the one who. I would have the most question marks about anyway. I don't really see him as an opening batter. I don't really necessarily see him as a number 3 either. I think he's sort of in there as an auxiliary opening batsman for when we lose an early wicket, just to protect Joe Root a bit more. I don't know about a series against the spin though. Maybe we can bring Bairstow back for that one to bat number 3. I don't know. I think with Zach Crawley, I don't want to take it away from him because it was, a truly spectacular innings. But he has, in 20 tests, only played one innings that was actually good. That's not actually good. I think he's got a couple of 70s, but it's not. If he didn't have that 267, he wouldn't be in this squad. And fair enough, he does have it. But it's potentially a problem for him.
If James Bracey performs really well, he could be in trouble because he wants that number 3 slot. He said it himself. So we could see. Yeah. I mean, that is an option, but I think just because of the fact that he's not necessarily actually a number 3, but for England, he's done that role reasonably well, I think, and that is, you don't want to put Pope at 3. Root doesn't want to do it, so. I think that's why. I think just in terms of the makeup of the side, that's why I'd say he's fairly safe.
Cheers, Swadin, for your super chat as well. We will move on to New Zealand now, but just a quick mention that you can follow us at the Cricket Pod on Twitter. You can, look at our sponsors, Cricket Equipment. I didn't do that very well. At Woodstock Cricket. And we're on Patreon, patreon.com/the Cricket Pod if you want to give to us directly. We need one more Patreon to get to the magic number 10. Max, talk to me about New Zealand. Actually, no. One last thing on England. We haven't mentioned it, but Anderson is going to equal Alistair Cook's record number of caps for England if he plays, which is a pretty stunning achievement. He's 8 wickets away from 1,000 wickets in first-class cricket as well. It could be, a double memorial for Jimmy. And the other geriatric pacer that England have, Stuart Broad, has been named as vice-captain, which is alarming, particularly as Roots just suffered an injury scare. Let's talk about New Zealand, though.
Yes. So, I mean, you alluded to it in your preview of England, that, you might think that New Zealand's bowlers would be licking their lips at getting at England's team. And I think that's what this series is all about, really, for New Zealand. It's about their bowling away from home. In New Zealand, they have swept everyone aside, and in particular, Carl Jamieson has decided that Test cricket in New Zealand is the easiest thing in the world, and he's taken 6 games, 36 wickets at an average of less than 15 or something. Absolutely ridiculous.
It's better than Ollie Robinson's first class average, and we've already talked about how good that is. So
yeah, it's obscene. But there's sort of there's like two people sort of have two differing opinions at the same time on this New Zealand bowling attack, which is quite an interesting one. On the one hand, you've got the view that really they ought to be really well suited to bowling in England, and they've got without Bolt that changes, but generally you'd say their pace attack should be ideal for English conditions. But then at the same time, people say, oh well, they're home bullies, and maybe they can't do it abroad. So I think this is a real opportunity for them to see what they can do. I mean, where do you sit in that argument, Jack, on New Zealand's pace attack? And
I think it's probably quite well suited to bowling with the Duke's ball. To be honest, at least sort of 2 or 3 of them have got reasonable pedigree swinging it. They've also got the possibility of bringing in Matt Henry, who, whilst he hasn't necessarily blown people away in New Zealand for New Zealand, you would think would be quite a good option in England. Kyle Jamieson, as you said, has taken to cricket like a duck to water. And the extra dynamic that Neil Wagner brings is, rare on the international cricket scene. So I'm probably overall in English conditions, I'm a big fan, I think, of this New Zealand bowling attack. I don't think it's as good as England's. I don't think the skill level, and by that I basically mean the ability to swing the ball both ways at will, is quite as good as as James Anderson's. And James Anderson is probably the differentiator between the two bowling attacks. But I don't think it will be easy for England, and I do think New Zealand will come equipped with a plan, and I think, I think there's possibly the wider ramifications of this series as well will be most keenly felt in the New Zealand bowling department, because we often see teams come to England, not bowl that well with the Duke's ball for a couple of tests, then figure it out, which puts India right in the firing line, basically. For a team that should have sort of figured some stuff out going into that. So, I like it overall, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the interesting thing about it is that we don't really know much about what these bowlers can do in English conditions, because we haven't seen that much of it. I mean, in terms of their overall overseas record compared with at home,
it's bad.
It's not great. Trent Bolt's average is 8.5 worse. Tim Southey's average is 10 worse overseas. I'll tell you who's actually almost exactly the same as Neil Wagner. He's in sort of half the number of games. He's actually taken 45 wickets in 11 games compared to 116 in 24. A very similar average and a better economy rate. So that's quite interesting. But most of those will have been in places where he can do that workhorse role that we've spoken about, where he charges in and does the legwork. But actually, of those, only Southey's played 4 games in England. That's the most, and that's not since 2015. Trent Bolt's last outing in that same series was phenomenal. He took 21 wickets and was very, very good. So that will be a miss. But Neil Wagner we've barely seen in England. Carl Jamieson we haven't even seen overseas. So it's actually quite a lot of unknowns.
I agree with you. I mean, I do think that you have to, when you compare home and away figures, you do have to factor in where these guys have had to play a lot of their away fixtures.
There's lots of very different aways.
I've just brought up Trent Bolt's stats, for example. I know he might not be the best one to talk about right now because he's not going to be here for the next test. But after New Zealand, the UAE is where he has bowled the most overs in Test cricket away from home. Yeah. Not generally known as a pace bowler's heaven. He's bowled a lot of overs in India as well. Again, not an easy place to go as a pace bowler. In England, his bowling average is 23. So
it's only 4 games, but
yeah, I would expect it to be closer to the England average. It might not be 23 again. It might be 25, 26. Could be 30. But I think he'll be closer to that than, the UAE, where it's 38 or 35 or something. Does that make sense? I think their skill set should suit
absolutely.
England a little bit more.
This is where the discussion about them being well suited to English conditions comes in. And I think that's possibly where some of the misconception comes in of people saying that maybe they're not that good overseas because of where they play, and they play in some graveyards. But Jameson, really interested to see how he gets on. I mean, is he the man you're most looking forward to seeing in England?
On the bowling side?
Yeah,
I think so. Obviously there's the Mitchell Santner factor as well. We know what England are like against left-arm spinners. So
or even Ajaz Patel.
Yeah. So there's one of them could be a bit of a wild card for causing some trouble.
So that's
I think Jameson is who we're all looking forward to seeing, really, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think that sort of brings us on to the main question for New Zealand, really, which is that who replaces Trent Bolt. I think the rest of the squad is pretty settled, the batting lineup. The only question might be about whether Devon Conway comes in to open, because he's he's in pretty good form. But aside from that, it's a very settled lineup, and you've got bags of experience with Ross Taylor and BJ Watling, who's approaching retirement and will want to go out with a bang. So I think, really the question comes in where we have, do we see some spin in Mitchell Santner, or maybe even Ajaz Patel? His story's quite interesting. I don't know if you know much about him, but he was a left-arm pacer all throughout his emerging career, and didn't start bowling spin until after he was 21, because he decided that at 5'6" he was never going to cut it at the next level as a left arm seamer. And it all basically started in one game where he opened the bowling and then came back to bowl spin. Ended up taking more wickets with the spin and never looked back. He was before COVID, he was the top wicket taker in New Zealand red ball cricket 3 seasons in a row.
So I think. To be honest, I think he'll be one for after the end of the World Test Championship cycle. I think, like you say, the New Zealand lineup's pretty settled. They kind of know their roles. I think they'll be sort of happy that the final is in England. I think it will suit their pace bowling attack reasonably well. I actually think Southampton might be a venue that they'll warm to quite well. It can be a little bit flatter than some of the other English venues, which, on a bad day are a little bit lottery-ish. But it tends to be having an attritional bowler like Neil Wagner at Southampton can be a real boon to your chances. So I think they'll be happy where the World Test Championship's being played. I think all round pretty good. I'm in their whole team, I'm really hoping, and I would be most excited about seeing Colin de Grandhomme back in action. I think there are some question marks around whether he'll be in, or Daryl Mitchell, or Santner, or Matt Henry. I think 2 of those 4 basically have to fill out that portion of the lineup, and obviously it will be kind of 1 of 4 when Bolt comes back in. Mm-hmm. But I do hope we get to see him against England, because the last time he was bowling against England, he was causing all sorts of mayhem in the World
this
Cup
is
final.
it. You've got two players there in Santner and de Grandon, who are basically the arch nemesis of English batting. Any left arm spin is an absolute disaster, and any extremely slow swing dibbly dobbler bowling is an absolute disaster. You only have to look at Tim Murtagh and what he did to England at Lords to remind you of that. So I think either option would probably cause just as much hectic collapsing in the English batting. But yeah, I suppose the only other thing to say is that it's the first return for much of this New Zealand team to Lords since 2019. So there's some scores to settle, perhaps.
Cool. Yeah. Should we do some predictions then?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll do who's going to win the series, what the score will be, top run scorer, top wicket taker. I can't remember who got it right for the last series we talked about, which would have been the ODIs. I'm going to say 2-1 2-1 India. I predicted 3-0 India, so I got it wrong by one game. One of you or Ross was probably right. So let's assume you're on a streak of one.
Great.
That means you
Sounds
get to go
good.
first. Who is going to win the series between England and New Zealand?
Well, I'm going to just pop myself on the fence, and it's going to be 1-1, I think. And then I'll take myself off the fence and qualify that by saying I think England might win the first one, because you've got a team that's fresh out of county championship action, and New Zealand will be maybe just getting to grips with things, and then New Zealand will come and run away with the second test in perfect preparation for the World Test Championship final.
I am going to say no, that's not going to happen, Max. I expect England at home to win this 2-0. I basically think that playing at home in June in England is more of an advantage than any skill differential that exists between these two sides.
Yeah.
I
Even
think
without Stokes and
don't care about
Archer
them. I like batters in June, irrelevant. In England, it's true. I mean, they use a stupid ball and they're going to get stupid results. So I expect Anderson abroad to be, too much.
Unplayable.
I expect Robinson to be in the mix as well. Making the most what will probably be some fairly juicy pitches. I know the weather's sort of all right now. As I look out the window, it's sort of 25 degrees, perfect weather really for cricket. But it's very much now. The now is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because it's been pretty miserable for May. Maybe the wettest May on record or something like that.
Yes, yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
And I suspect that will have a little bit of an impact on pitch quality.
Yep.
I also think, and this has, like we were saying with bowling average and stuff, there's a little bit of noise in this stat, but New Zealand, they've lost 9 of their last 12 away matches. So, look, I know if you're going to the UAE to play Pakistan, you've got basically no hope. Or although I think they did actually win one of those games. Or even if you go to Sri Lanka or you go to Bangladesh, they're really tricky places to go if you don't have a battery of spin bowlers, which they don't really. But they're obviously a team that have a method that's very effective at home that doesn't transfer remarkably well to all other climes, and England are similar to that in many ways, and I suspect that in the battle of the home advantage thing, that England will win. Most wickets, Max.
So I think with both the wickets and the runs, and obviously in a 2-match series, you're basically looking at who has a ridiculous day. So I'm going to say that Carl Jamieson is going to have a day where he takes 7 wickets, and that is going to propel him to the top of the leaderboard.
I'm going to go Ollie Robinson. I think that he. So if I knew Anderson or Broad were going to play both matches, I would pick one of them. But I think that there's a good chance that one of them won't. So I'm hedging my bets basically here, and I'm saying that the England seamer that will play both matches will be Ollie Robinson. I think he's going to be pretty good. I don't think that New Zealand will have a massive dossier on him. So I think they'll be basically playing a guy they've never seen before, who is very good. Sort of walked out of Sussex onto the pitch at Lords, as far as they're concerned, and it's going to cause them some trouble.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you want to go with the runs then?
Yeah, after you, Max.
Oh, after me. Okay. Well, once again, it's going to be someone who compiles about 200 in one innings if they get the chance, isn't it? And I'm gonna. Oh, let's say could be anyone. Let's go with Ollie Pope.
Oh, Ollie Pope.
I'm going with a home pick there.
It's very difficult to say that you think a bowler is going to be the top wicket taker in a 2-match series from one side, and then pick someone from the other side, because you'd expect them to have caused too much carnage by then. So I'm going to.
Oh, but it just takes one person, doesn't it?
We're really down on New Zealand. By the time they've warmed up for the India match, they'll be hot. But I don't think, basically walking off a plane and having to play at Lords against a bunch of guys who've had a 10-week preparation period for this.
In the first test, I'd be absolutely stunned. Even with how terrible England are at Lords, I'd be absolutely stunned.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go Dom Sibley. Maybe a bit of a wild card, but I think he gets to play at his home ground, doesn't he, at Edgbaston?
True.
Which will be good for him. And I can see at least one of New Zealand's opening bowlers struggling a little bit. So I don't think there'll be pressure from both ends at the top of the order. So I'm going to go Dom Sibley. Right, Max. I think we want to move on from the Test series now. I think we previewed it well. We've got 10 minutes till you have to go. So do you want to rattle through the county championship really quickly? And I'll talk about the IPL really quickly, and then we'll have time for just a couple of questions, I think.
Sure. So yeah, okay. County Championship. It's County Championship end of part one. We've got 2 or 3 games of the group stage to go for most teams. A couple of teams finishing up later this week, and the race for Division 1 is hotting up. So just a little recap for anyone who may have forgotten, because it is quite a complicated set of affairs. You've got three groups of 6 at the moment. The top 2 of each of those will go into Division 1 to play off for the County Championship title, and the other places will go into Divisions 2 and 3 to play some more games against each other and try not to be the worst of everyone. And there will be the Bob Willis Trophy between the first and second place of the top division. But yeah, the golden chalice at the moment for these teams is to get one of those top 2 places in the 3 divisions they're in, and it's I think it's looking fairly tight for all 3 groups, which is great. And there was another great round of fixtures this weekend, which has kept everything nice and lively. So in the first group, we have Essex leading Group 1 by 5 points, but the perennial success story of county cricket is in danger of missing out, because they have played a game more than both Nottinghamshire and Warwickshire, who are 2nd and 3rd respectively. And Essex will be facing Notts starting on Thursday, which is basically a must-win for them, because you have both Nottinghamshire and Warwickshire playing the bottom 2 sides in that division in the shape of Durham and Derbyshire. So you would expect them to be fairly comfortable wins. So Essex need to get something out of that game, or they could be in danger. That'd be a bit of a shock, wouldn't it, Jack?
It would be a big time shock. Although, last week we were saying Durham had a chance of overtaking them, and they absolutely pounded Durham. So I think Essex will be all right.
Yeah, well, I suppose Durham have lost Mark Wood, so that probably doesn't help. And Essex have still got Alistair Cook and Simon Harmer, so maybe that's why they do so well now. But still, interesting times there. In Group 2, there was a big win for Surrey. Go on, the Surrey over Gloucestershire, which kept things a bit interesting. But Surrey in 3rd are still a few points off 2nd place and have played a game more, so they need one of the top 2 in Gloucestershire and Somerset to slip up. Hampshire could yet make a late charge, because in their last 3 games they have to play Surrey and Hampshire, and that could be, they basically win their last 3 and they're in with a big shout. But ultimately, it's looking fairly good for Somerset and Gloucestershire, and it's in their hands really. And And obviously, I think Gloucestershire's last 2 fixtures are against Middlesex and Leicestershire, who have been abysmal
Yes.
so far.
Yeah. Sorry, Dan Weston.
Leicestershire got their first win this weekend, so
They did,
congratulations
yeah.
to them.
Well, Dan Weston, he was thinking about joining us, but he had to go on the BBC to talk about Leicestershire County Cricket Club, so we do commiserate with him for now.
And then on to Group 3, where the story of the weekend was the Roses match, and the War of the Roses was a bit of a massacre on this occasion. Lancashire won by an innings. Although Yorkshire did manage to take it quite deep in the end, I think it was Saqib Mahmood won things in the final half an hour. But ultimately, it was the first innings collapse by Yorkshire, which proved pretty terminal. And they really need to sort out their batting. I think they have a paltry 8 batting bonus points, which is basically the worst out of everyone. And only Adam Lyth has been any good whatsoever. So that's not great for them. They're still second, but only just ahead of Northants, and their last 2 games are against Northants and a final round fixture of a return game against Lancashire. So they're it's still in their hands, but they've got a tough finish. So we've got pretty much
games.
3 or 4 teams in the hunt for each group.
Yeah, no, it's what happened to Yorkshire in that Yorkshire-Lancashire game is the sort of thing that can happen in England if it all goes wrong on the first morning of a game, and that's basically what I think New Zealand are going to lose. I think that'll happen to them at least once or twice.
You reckon that's going to be a 3-dayer, the Lord's game?
I think it could be. I mean, if you were going to bet on a test this summer being 3 days long, that would be the one.
Lords in June.
We are getting some grief from someone called Shambu in the chat who says, "Don't act smart." Or don't act like smart or champions against the Kiwis. You have robbed them of their Cricket World Cup trophy. Don't ever forget that. Unfortunately, the rules meant that that's not true. So I don't know what else to say. It's just how it works, isn't it? Sorry about that, Shambu. I'm sure that will hurt to be reminded of. The IPL, we've got a little update on that. It won't be an update for everyone because some people already know this, but as far as we understand, it has been rescheduled, or they're pretty sure that they're going to reschedule it for a period of time. Now, because it's the IPL and because none of this stuff ever comes out until about 3 days before the tournament, the dates aren't very specific. This was the best quote I could find. The BCCI has spoken to all the stakeholders, and the IPL will likely start between September the 18th and September the 20th. Since September the 18th is a Saturday and September the 19th is a Sunday, they want to restart on a weekend date. Similarly, October the 9th or 10th will be the final. That, in the bigger scheme means that obviously the ECB turned down the request to reschedule the 5th test of the summer, which is a shame. Well, it's not really a shame, is it? But it's a shame for
the BCCI.
All of our theories we discussed last week.
Yes.
It will probably take place in the IPL. In the
IPL?
In the UAE.
UAE. The other acronym.
And it's likely that there will be a diminished player pool. We know, for instance, Ashley Giles said this week that the England players won't be there. Shakib will not be getting a no objection certificate. Kyle Jamieson gave an interview saying he wasn't sure he'd be able to play. The Australian CEO, David Hockley, I think, said that they hadn't discussed the possibility of any of the Australian players returning to the IPL yet. So I think it will be like a very different tournament.
And also the CPL starts just before then as well. I think that's supposed to wrap up on maybe the 19th of September. They're trying to convince the West Indies Cricket Board to change a few dates of the CPL to get that to finish earlier as well. So, but yeah, basically everyone. Is a doubt.
That's obviously, I mean, the other thing from this is going to be a massive strain on these Indian players. They're basically going to be playing high stakes cricket for 12 months, going back to Australia last year. Burnout's a problem in this sport.
And in bubbles as well.
Yeah, and that is a really dumb way of organising your. Well, it's not. I understand why it's happened, but it's going to be tough, and I think they're going to have to look at, giving some of the players who played the Test series in England the IPL off. I just can't see how it's going to be healthy for them to go England Series, IPL, fly to England, World Test Championship, England Series, IPL, Cricket World Cup. Like it's an absolutely bonkers calendar. Max, do you have to go, or do we have 5 minutes maybe for some questions?
We can do 5 minutes of questions. Yep.
Okay, so we had one from Sunak on Twitter. He basically asked, between India's pace battery and New Zealand's pace battery, who do you like the most? So Bolt, Jamieson, Wagner, Southey, or Bumrah, Ishant, Siraj, and Shami, say?
Hard, isn't it? Can I cop out and say we'll find out in the end of the year?
Yeah, of course you can. I mean, that's the beauty of live sport, isn't it? That's these questions have been posed by India and New Zealand's results, and the World Test Championship will provide those answers. So of course you can say that.
It's really, really, really close. I think probably we're at a situation where maybe the experience of India might shade it for now, but Jameson, being the unproven quantity, could tip it back.
Fair enough. We also had over on Twitter one from Epsity, would Rory Burns' place be at risk, particularly given the emergence of some of the younger players, if England had a full squad? You're a Surrey man, Max. What do you think of Rory Burns' chances this summer?
I think he needs a good summer, yeah. He's he's threatened a good score on quite a few occasions, and then gone and done something stupid and ended up getting out playing. I mean, he has this sort of tendency, doesn't he, to actually look quite good and then play an absolutely disgusting shot to a spinner for no apparent reason, and get out for 30 or 40. And he needs to not do that in a couple of games and put on a decent score. But again, the question always is, who do you play instead? And I think there are possibly a few younger players coming through who may have a shot at...
Given the limited practice that the Indian team are going to get in advance, what should they do, Max? If you were Ravi Shastri, what would you do?
What I'd do is much like England did with their game in India. I'd call the bluff of the pitch makers and pick an all spin attack for Southampton. I mean, what can you do? Just get as much preparation as you can. Well, the players are in England. Get as much prep in as you can, and hope for the best. Really, cool. Make your plans against the other team. Do your homework and try and find ways of getting them out. Watch the England series very closely and hope that that gives you some clues.
I'm just flicking through our live chat, and I'm not really sure we've got many questions, apart from one from Shubham here, who says, who's a better batsman according to you, Kane Williamson or Joe Root, Max?
Kane Williamson.
There we are.
He's phenomenal.
He is. He's very good, isn't he? I'd probably say Williamson as well, even though Root was spectacular in Sri Lanka and early in the India series.
I mean, you can cheat a bit, can't you, and say cross format Kane Williamson has the edge because he's excellent at T20 as well. Yeah, sure, you can do that, and why not? So, given that we don't really have much else left in the chat, Shambu, after giving us the bird, is flipping us the bird in the chat, is now trying to get us to answer a question, but we're not going to do that. We're gonna we're going to ignore you. Power. Jack's drunk with power. It's gone to his head.
So we're going to wrap up the podcast now. Max is off to football. Reminder, follow us at The Cricket Pod. Head over to Woodstock to buy your new cricket bat. Ross, he only got 25 this week, but it was a good 25. I still haven't used mine. Max, did you get any runs?
I got 20 with mine. Scored some glorious fours and then played down the wrong line.
Okay.
Not the bat's fault.
Head over to Patreon, patreon.com/thecricketpod. Help us go from 9 to 10 Patreons. That's the big achievement we're trying to accomplish this year. And hit subscribe, hit like. Leave us a comment if you're watching this after the live chat. Cheerio. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.